Vanessa had loved Adrian with all her heart, only for him to betray her in the most humiliating way. On their third wedding anniversary, she walked into a celebration she wasn't invited to. Her husband was toasting to a new beginning with another woman, her best friend. Heartbroken and cast aside, Vanessa swore revenge. But revenge had to be calculated. Cold, ruthless. She had to hit Adrian where it hurt the most. That's when she set her sights on the one man Adrian never wanted to cross. His father, Victor Lancaster, a billionaire CEO feared for his power and influence. Marrying Victor would not only humiliate Adrian but also put Vanessa in control of everything he once took for granted. However, what was supposed to be a simple revenge plot turns into a twisted game of secrets, deception, and shocking truths, because Vanessa soon learns that her marriage to Victor wasn't just her plan. It was his, too, and the reason behind it shakes her to the core. The air was thick with the scent of champagne and roses as Vanessa adjusted the delicate silver necklace Adrian had given her for their first anniversary. She had spent weeks planning this night, a surprise dinner to celebrate 3 years of marriage. She wore the red dress he loved, her hair cascading in soft waves, a smile tugging at her lips as she imagined his reaction. But when she pushed open the door to their favorite upscale restaurant, her world shattered. There he was, Adrian, standing at the center of a crowd, his arm draped around her best friend, Chloe. The room buzzed with clinking glasses and laughter, a toast ringing out. To Adrian and Chloe, a new chapter. Vanessa froze, her bouquet of lilies slipping from her hands, petals scattering across the polished floor. Heads turned, whispers rippled, but Adrian didn't even flinch. His eyes met hers briefly, cold, unapologetic, before he turned back to Chloe and kissed her, sealing Vanessa's humiliation in front of everyone they knew. The divorce came swiftly after that. Adrian didn't fight for her, didn't explain. He simply handed her the papers, his signature already scrawled in black ink, and walked away with Chloe on his arm. Vanessa was left with nothing. No home, no savings, no dignity. She spent nights replaying the betrayal, her tears staining the cheap motel sheets where she now lived. But as the weeks turned into months, the grief hardened into something sharper. Rage. She wouldn't just fade away. She'd make Adrian pay. One rainy afternoon, Vanessa sat in a dimly lit cafe, nursing a cold coffee and sketching out ideas in a battered notebook. She wrote his name, Adrian Lancaster, and circled it, her pen digging into the paper. How could she hurt him? Money? No, he'd inherited enough to cushion any financial blow. His reputation? Maybe. Then it hit her, his family. Adrian had always idolized his father, Victor Lancaster, the billionaire CEO of Lancaster Enterprises. Victor was untouchable, a man whose name alone commanded respect and fear. Adrian lived in his shadow, desperate for approval he'd never fully earned. If Vanessa could take that from him, if she could infiltrate the one relationship Adrian cherished, she'd have her revenge. She began researching Victor obsessively. She combed through old interviews, tabloid rumors, and grainy photos of the silver-haired tycoon. At 58, he was still striking, tall, broad-shouldered, with piercing gray eyes and a reputation for ruthlessness in business and personal affairs. Divorced twice, no close ties except his strained bond with Adrian. Vanessa learned his routines, the private club he frequented, the charity galas he attended for optics. She'd need to get close, but how? She wasn't naive. Victor wouldn't fall for a sob story or a pretty face. She'd have to be strategic. Fate intervened a month later. Vanessa secured a temp job as a server at an exclusive charity auction, one she knew Victor would attend. She wore a borrowed black dress that hugged her curves, her makeup subtle but striking. When she spotted him across the room, sipping scotch, his tailored suit exuding power, she made her move. Balancing a tray of champagne flutes, she approached his table, her heart pounding. Up close, Victor was even more intimidating, his presence like a storm cloud rolling in. She offered him a glass, her voice steady despite the nerves. "Mr. Lancaster, you look like a man who appreciates the finer things." He raised an eyebrow, studying her with a gaze that felt like it could peel back her skin. "And you look like a woman who doesn't belong here," he replied, his voice low and smooth, tinged with curiosity. "What's your name?" "Vanessa," she said, holding his stare. "And maybe I don't belong yet." That night they talked. She was careful, flirty but sharp, dropping hints of her wit and resilience without revealing too much. Victor seemed intrigued, his guarded demeanor softening just enough to keep her in his orbit. Over the next few weeks, she engineered more chance encounters. A brush past him at his club, a clever remark at another event. Each time he lingered longer, asked more questions. She could feel the hook sinking in. Then came the night that changed everything. Vanessa was leaving a late shift at a bar when a sleek black car pulled up beside her. The window rolled down, revealing Victor in the back seat, his expression unreadable. "Get in," he said. It wasn't a request. She hesitated, her pulse racing, but slid into the leather seat beside him. The car smelled of expensive cologne and danger. For a moment, neither spoke, the hum of the engine filling the silence. Then Victor turned to her, his gray eyes glinting in the dim light. "I know who you are, Vanessa, Adrian's ex-wife. And I know what he did to you." Her stomach dropped. She opened her mouth to protest, but he held up a hand. "Don't bother denying it. I've been watching you too. You're clever, more than he ever gave you credit for. And I have a proposition." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Marry me. Become a Lancaster. You'll have everything: money, power, a front row seat to watch Adrian squirm. All I ask is your loyalty." Vanessa's mind spun. This was it, her revenge handed to her on a silver platter. She could already picture Adrian's face, the fury and helplessness as she stood beside his father, wielding the Lancaster name like a weapon. But something nagged at her. Why would Victor, a man who could have anyone, choose her? What did he gain? She searched his face for answers, but his expression was a mask. Cool, calculating, and hiding something she couldn't yet grasp. "Deal," she said finally, extending her hand. He took it, his grip firm, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of a smile. "Good," he murmured. "Let's make them all regret crossing us." As the car sped into the night, Vanessa felt a thrill of triumph and a shiver of unease. She'd wanted revenge, and now she had the means to get it. But Victor's willingness, his cryptic words, planted a seed of doubt. What game was he playing? And what shocking truth waited at the end of this twisted road? The car ride stretched on, the city lights blurring past the tinted windows as Vanessa wrestled with Victor's proposal. She couldn't shake the feeling that she'd stepped into a chess game where she was both player and pawn. "Why me?" she finally asked, her voice cutting through the silence. "You could have any woman. Someone younger, richer, less complicated." Victor chuckled, a low, rumbling sound that sent a chill down her spine. "Because you're not just anyone, Vanessa. You've got fire. And I need someone who can handle what's coming." He turned to her, his gray eyes glinting with something she couldn't place. Amusement? Warning, Adrian's not the only one who'll feel this. Trust me, you'll see. Before she could press him further, the car slowed to a stop outside a towering glass building, Lancaster Enterprises headquarters. Victor stepped out, offering her his hand. "Tomorrow we start. Be ready." As she took it, her fingers brushing his, Vanessa felt the weight of her decision settle in. Revenge was hers for the taking. But at what cost? The wedding was a spectacle, a whirlwind of opulence that left society gasping and Adrian seething. Vanessa stood in a sleek, ivory gown, her chin high as she exchanged vows with Victor in a grand cathedral packed with whispering elites. Photographers snapped furiously, headlines already screaming. Billionaire Victor Lancaster weds ex-daughter-in-law in scandalous twist. Adrian stormed in just as the priest declared them husband and wife, his face a mask of red-hot fury. "You're a gold-digging snake," he spat, lunging toward Vanessa. Security dragged him out, but not before she caught the desperation in his eyes, a look that fueled her satisfaction. The reception was a blur of fake smiles and calculated moves. Vanessa played the part flawlessly, her arm linked with Victor's as they danced under crystal chandeliers. Guests murmured about her audacity, but she didn't care. Every glance Adrian stole from across the room, where he sulked with Chloe clinging to him, felt like a victory. She leaned into Victor, whispering, "He's unraveling already." Victor's lips twitched into a smirk. "Good. Let him." But as the days turned into weeks, Vanessa began to notice cracks in the facade. Victor wasn't the cold tyrant she'd expected. At home in his sprawling mansion, he was different, quieter, almost tender. One night, she found him in his study, staring at an old photo of a young Adrian and a woman she didn't recognize. "Who's that?" she asked, stepping closer. He shut the frame face down, his voice tight. "No one you need to worry about." But the way his hand lingered on the desk told her otherwise. Later, when she caught him slipping a pill bottle into his pocket, he brushed it off with a gruff, "Just old age." She didn't buy it. Victor was hiding something, and it wasn't just vulnerability. The game twisted further when strange things started happening. It began with a late-night phone call. Silence on the other end, then a distorted voice hissing, "Leave him, or you'll regret it." Vanessa dismissed it as Adrian's petty retaliation. But then came the black envelope slipped under her door. Inside was a single photo. Victor, decades younger, standing beside a woman who looked eerily like Vanessa, her face scratched out. No note, no explanation. Her pulse raced as she shoved it into a drawer, but the questions gnawed at her. Who sent it? And why did Victor's past feel so tangled with her present? Digging deeper became an obsession. One stormy afternoon, while Victor was at a board meeting, Vanessa slipped into his locked study. She jimmied the desk drawer open, her breath catching as she found a faded letter addressed to "My dearest Victor." The handwriting was elegant, feminine, and the words chilling. "You can't keep her from him forever. The truth will destroy you both." Beneath it lay a birth certificate, Adrian's. But the mother's name was blacked out. Vanessa's hands trembled. Was this about Adrian's mother? And why did Victor marry her to guard it? That night, Victor returned home early, catching her with the papers in hand. His face darkened, but instead of anger, there was something else, fear. "You weren't supposed to see that," he said, his voice low and unsteady. "But maybe it's time you knew." He sank into a chair, gesturing for her to sit. "This isn't just about revenge, Vanessa. It's about protecting you and destroying a lie that's haunted me for 30 years. She stared at him, her heart pounding. "What lie? Tell me everything." Victor met her gaze, and for the first time, she saw the weight of a man burdened by secrets too dangerous to keep and too explosive to bury. Victor's confession hung in the air, heavy and unfinished. Vanessa clutched the faded letter, her voice trembling as she demanded, "What lie, Victor? What aren't you telling me?" He rubbed his temples, the lines on his face deepening. "It's about Adrian, and you," he said, his tone laced with regret. "I didn't just pick you for revenge. There's more at stake. More than you can imagine." Before he could elaborate, a sharp crash echoed from downstairs. Glass shattering, followed by hurried footsteps. Victor's eyes widened. "They're here," he muttered, grabbing her arm and pulling her toward a hidden panel in the wall. "Stay quiet. Trust me." As they slipped into a narrow passageway, Vanessa's mind raced. Who was they? And why did Victor look so rattled? The answers were coming, but danger was closing in faster. The passageway led to a small, dimly lit room. A panic room, Vanessa realized, lined with monitors showing the mansion's security feeds. Victor locked the door behind them, his hands shaking as he pulled up the footage. On the screens, she saw them. Adrian and Chloe, creeping through the house with two masked men, their movements deliberate. Adrian held a crowbar, his face twisted with a fury she'd never seen. "He's lost it," Victor whispered, sinking into a chair. "He's been planning this for months." Vanessa's stomach churned. "Planning what?" she demanded, her voice rising. Victor met her gaze, his expression grim. "To kill me, and now you. I married you to protect you, Vanessa. Adrian's after the Lancaster fortune, and he thinks I'm the only thing standing in his way. But you were my shield. He'd never suspect I'd tie my fate to his ex-wife. The revelation hit her like a punch. Not love, not even revenge. Protection. She'd been a decoy, a pawn in Victor's desperate bid to outmaneuver his own son. Rage flared, but before she could lash out, the monitors flickered. Adrian's group was nearing the study, smashing furniture, searching. They've got the safe codes, Victor said, panic creeping into his voice. If they find the will, it's over. Vanessa forced herself to focus, her mind spinning. Why me, Victor? Why not hire guards or disappear? He hesitated, then pulled a small key from his pocket, unlocking a drawer in the room. Inside was a file, yellowed, marked confidential. Because of this, he said, handing it to her. She opened it, her breath catching as she read. A DNA test, dated 30 years ago, proving Adrian wasn't Victor's biological son. The real father? A name she didn't recognize, some long-dead business rival. Victor's voice was barely audible. I raised him as mine, but he's never known. I married you to keep him distracted, to buy time to rewrite the will. But he's smarter than I thought. Her revenge, the whole foundation of her plan, crumbled. Adrian wasn't Victor's heir, meaning her marriage, her triumph, was built on a lie. She stared at the paper, betrayal burning through her. You used me, she hissed. All of this, my pain, my anger, for your game? Victor reached for her, but she recoiled. I had no choice, he pleaded. I thought I could save us both. The monitors beeped. Adrian's crew had breached the study. Chloe's voice crackled through the feed. Find them, or we're dead broke by morning. Vanessa realized the stakes had shifted. Adrian and Chloe weren't just after Victor. They wanted her gone too, a loose end in their grab for power. The masked men fanned out, weapons glinting in the dim light. Real danger loomed, and she was trapped in the crossfire. Her fury morphed into resolve. She turned to Victor, voice cold. You're not the only one who can play this game. Tell me everything now, or I walk out there and let them have you. Victor nodded, defeated, and began spilling decades of secrets. Adrian's mother's affair, the rival's death, the fortune tied up in a trust only Victor controlled. But as he spoke, Vanessa's mind raced ahead. She wasn't a pawn anymore. She'd turned this chaos to her advantage, an idea sparked. She grabbed Victor's phone, dialing the police with a fabricated story. Intruders, a break-in, imminent threat. Then she whispered to Victor, when they get here, you're confessing. All of it. Adrian's not your son, and I'm not your shield. I'm done being used. He stared at her, a mix of awe and fear in his eyes, but nodded. Minutes later, sirens wailed outside. Adrian and Chloe froze on the monitors, panic setting in as red and blue lights flooded the estate. Vanessa stepped out of the panic room, her heart pounding but her head clear. The ultimate betrayal wasn't Victor's lie. It was her own blindness to the bigger game. Now she'd rewrite the ending. Adrian would lose everything, not because of her marriage, but because she'd exposed the truth he'd never seen coming. The sirens grew louder, piercing the night as Vanessa stood at the panic room's threshold. Victor's confession still ringing in her ears. Adrian wasn't his son. Her entire revenge had been a house of cards built on a lie. She gripped the DNA file, her knuckles white, when a new sound cut through the chaos. A gunshot from downstairs. Victor flinched, pulling her back inside. They're not just here for the will, he rasped. Adrian's gone too far. He'll kill us both to bury this. The monitors showed Chloe screaming at Adrian, do it already, as he aimed a pistol at the ceiling, wild-eyed and unraveling. Vanessa's breath hitched. This wasn't just a power grab anymore. It was survival. The mansion trembled with tension as Vanessa faced her final showdown. The police were closing in, but Adrian's desperation made him unpredictable. She turned to Victor, her voice steel. We end this now together. You take the fall for your secrets, and I take him down for good. Victor nodded, a flicker of respect in his haunted eyes. They stepped out, hands raised, just as the front doors burst open. Cops swarming, shouting commands. Adrian spun, gun in hand, but Vanessa didn't flinch. "It's over," she called out. "You're not even a Lancaster. Check the file." Chaos erupted. Adrian lunged for the papers, but an officer tackled him, pinning him to the marble floor. Chloe shrieked, turning on him in a flash of betrayal. "You idiot! I told you this wouldn't work," she spat, shoving a hidden recorder into a cop's hands. "He planned it all, Victor's murder, the break-in, everything. I've got it all here." The room stilled as Adrian's face drained of color, his empire crumbling in real time. Chloe's betrayal wasn't loyalty to Vanessa or Victor. It was self-preservation, a last-ditch move to save herself from the sinking ship. Reporters outside caught every word, and by morning, Adrian's reputation was ash. Vanessa watched it unfold, the weight of the DNA file still in her hands. Victor stood beside her, silent as the police cuffed Adrian and Chloe. She had a choice now. Keep clawing for revenge, exposing Victor's decades of deception to ruin him too, or dig deeper into why he dragged her into this mess. She turned to him, voice low. "Why me, Victor? Really? No more lies." He sighed, looking older than ever. "Because you reminded me of her, Adrian's mother. She was fierce like you and I failed her. I thought, maybe I could save you instead." The truth settled over her. Not a grand scheme, but a broken man's guilt. Revenge had fueled her, but it was a hollow fire now. Adrian was finished, his name synonymous with scandal. His fortune slipping away as the will favored Victor's chosen heirs. Charities, not family. Vanessa could destroy Victor too, leak the DNA test, let the world tear him apart. But as she looked at him, frail, defeated, she saw a man already broken. Instead, she chose herself. She handed the file to a detective, her voice steady. "This ends the Lancaster lie. Adrian's not his son. Let the courts sort it out." Then she walked away, past the flashing cameras, past Victor's pleading gaze. She didn't need his wealth or his name anymore. In the days that followed, she sold her story, not for revenge, but for truth, exposing Adrian's crimes in a tell-all that funded her new start. The mansion faded into the rearview as she drove off, free at last. But one question lingered, Victor. Did she leave him behind forever? Or would she one day forgive the man who'd both used and saved her? She didn't know yet, only that her destiny was hers to write. What do you think? Should Vanessa give Victor a second chance? Or is she better off starting fresh alone? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more wild stories like this every week. Hit that bell so you never miss a twist.